Let's go ahead, though, and get into John Mozeliak's comments from Monday afternoon. The way we're going to do this is basically chronological order because I've got these clipped out, and I'll play a clip and react to it because there's a lot to get to from Mo this afternoon. The moral of the story, though, the Cardinals are waving the white flag on the 2023 season. We kind of figured that was the case already because of what he had said to Martin Kilcoyne the other day. But I think we got a lot more detail from John Mozeliak in this session. So let's go ahead and hop into it with the first Mo quote, which is clipped off from him kind of kicking off the entire media session, talking about what the Cardinals' plans are for the rest of this season, and especially as they approach the trade deadline.
As we start looking at this, we know the season hasn't gone as planned. Certainly going to look at how we can take some of the players we have on this team and turn it into future talent. And, as we try to explore that, can take many different turns. But obviously, my staff's going to be very busy in the next few weeks trying to find ways to improve this team as we look to the future.
So that was John Mozeliak talking about they're looking to take the players on this team, the ones that are maybe short-term assets, and turn them into assets for the future. That's kind of the thesis statement, if you will, of the entire session with John Mozeliak. The Cardinals waving the white flag on 2023 in the way that they approach the trade deadline. And is there a possibility that a winning streak could change their trajectory and their plans at the deadline? Well, Frank Cusimano thought to ask that question to John Mozeliak, so here's that clip. In case you were wondering that, which I think it's a fair question to ask for a team that has now won 6 out of their last 8 games.
Mo, does what happened in the next 2 weeks have anything to do on what you will actually do at the deadline?
In terms of how we play, you mean?
Yes.
Does performance, wins, losses change our direction? I would say probably not at this point. I think where we are and where we are in the standings, it's going to make it very difficult to change that. It's not to say that if we, won 8 straight, you might take a pause in how you think about something. But I would say from our standpoint on how we're thinking about using our energy and time right now, it won't change.
So John Mozeliak is basically taking the possibility out of the equation that the Cardinals could play their way back into relevance in this division. And I want to spend a little time unpacking that because that's not something that probably sits well with Nolan Arenado. Now, it's not to say that he has not been briefed on this and that he and Paul Goldschmidt were not in conversations. Arenado said tonight that, he's talked to Mozeliak and they have casual conversations, regular contact all the time. And so I'm not thinking that this was something that took Nolan Arenado by surprise. Although I will say with the way that John Denton phrased the first question about it to Arenado, he said, Mo kind of told everybody that this afternoon that he's, kind of waving the white flag. Arenado kind of raised his eyebrows a little bit at that phrasing because that this is a guy that absolutely does not want to be any part of waving a white flag. He's still got a lot to play for, always. So I'll play some Nolan Arenado in the midst of this because we're just kind of kicking this off and setting the scene. We still have to talk, by the way, about Genesis Cabrera, the fact that he's not on this team anymore. Was on Instagram Live tonight, had his Cardinals branded gear turned inside out. The tags were showing on the outside. Complaining about whatever he was complaining about with the Cardinals. I don't speak Spanish, so I don't really know. But that was kind of funny going on during the Cardinal game. Anyway, let's get you some Nolan Arenado in your life, huh?
When you hear that Mo says pretty much kind of waving the white flag on this season and building for 24, how does that sit with a competitor like yourself?
I try not to pay attention to it too much, I just try to go out and compete every day. Still playing for something. I know I am, so, it's, I don't know if it's sense of pride or what it is, but I'm playing for something.
You feel like you guys need to try and, show what you can do? Is that part of the motivation going down the stretch here? I mean, just what, I guess as a group, do you feel like you guys want to accomplish, even if it's not necessarily, making a full run or, for a playoff or something?
I mean, the goal is to win. I mean, that's not going to change. So we're trying to go out there and win ball games. And, I don't look at the standings anymore. I'm past that now. But, just go out and try to win ball games. if you're a young player, you're always playing for something. You know, you make some money in this game and solidify yourself as a baseball player on this team and a job for next. I mean, there's a bunch of things to play for, and I'm playing for, I don't know, I'm finding reasons to play, you know, I'm representing family and a bunch of things, so just trying to play my best.
Nolan, is there also a case of you guys stack enough of those days in a row that are W's that there maybe comes a point where you start looking at the standings again, and that's still
Maybe,
on the back
yeah,
burner?
maybe. I mean, not for a while, but maybe. Like I said, go out there and compete. There's no reason why our mindset should change from not trying to win.
Is there an element of also trying to sort of build some momentum towards maybe next season too? Just because you guys have a group here that it doesn't sound like the whole core is going to change. It sounds like especially the lineup is looking to go forward with it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think about next year. I think that's a terrible strategy. I ain't got time for thinking about next year. I got to think about now and what I need to get done and try to help this team win. But there's no guarantees next year is going to be a great year either. So, and there's no guarantees I'm going to be healthy next year either. So I think about now, going out and competing.
Nolan, Mo said that he spoke to you and they kind of talked about where things are in this season and maybe even give you a glimpse of what his view of how to make things better. Are you in a good spot after that conversation?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, we, probably won't get into detail what we talked about, but we talk. I talk to him all the time. I mean, he's walking through here all the time. You know what I mean? So just casual conversations, and I think this season hasn't turned out the way any of us thought it was going to turn out. But yeah, we just have normal conversations.
Is it a good thing that he's not hiding from the standings in a way, like that they're not excusing them?
The one
away?
thing I appreciate about Mo, for sure, he's just he'll shoot you straight. He's honest, and that's all you can ask for is honesty, and I appreciate that about him. So I have a great relationship with Mo. So he's honest, and I appreciate that.
I mean,
so
you
I don't
get
really
the sense it bothers him.
I mean, it bothers everybody here. Yeah, nobody's happy about what's going on, but for sure, I know he's, like I said, he's honest, and I know he's not happy about it.
When you're in the prime of your career, you talk about not wanting to give up on this season yet. Like, you don't want to give up games in your prime, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to fritter those away, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, the standings, I don't look at it anymore, but I'm just trying to go out, compete, set an example, regardless if we're in a good spot or not. There's still young guys here that need to understand that you got to play through things and you got to try to find ways to win and find ways to motivate yourself when things aren't going right. So that's all I'm trying to do.
So there's Nolan Arenado talking about the various motivations, the various reasons that he isn't looking at the standings right now, but still finds plenty to play for. And you could tell in the tone of his voice, he doesn't really enjoy that this Cardinals team is going through what it's going through. And he doesn't want to think about 2024 because 2024 is not a given for him or for anybody. To say that you can guarantee a guy's going to be healthy, you're going to be part of a season next year that's going to be this great thing when you're in the middle of the 2023 campaign. And so Arenado trying to stay present, trying to keep right where it is. But from a business perspective, he does seem to understand and says he's still got a good relationship with Mo. So you don't have to bark up those trees. Like the people who say, oh, Mo lied to Arenado about what it would be and he wishes he hadn't opted in or whatever. Like that's not, I just don't think that's reality, especially the part that he lied to him. Like this was not a bait and switch that John Mozeliak pulled on Arenado specifically just to get him here and then have the team suck. Like I don't think Cardinals fans stop to think sometimes when they try to connect those dots that aren't really there. Look, John Mozeliak thought they had enough this year, and he was wrong about that, and he's having to do the apology tour right now, and rightfully so. I mean, he's the one that thought they had the depth when it came to pitching, and they didn't. But I don't think it's this sort of bait and switch that he pulled on Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt or anybody else. But that's how Arenado feels. It's not surprising to hear him say those things, and to hear the passion behind the words, I think, is noteworthy. But let's jump back into John Mozeliak because that's kind of what we wanted to spend most of the time on. But because we were talking about it specifically, I thought we would let you hear from Arenado as well. But back to Mozeliak. Again, the Cardinals are going to be in sell mode. They have essentially waved the white flag. Like when Mozeliak says, an 8-game winning streak, maybe we think about taking a pause. Which, by the way, they've now won 3 in a row. So if I have to go, perhaps maybe all of this is a moot point. But it really does seem like the Cardinals are set in stone of the way he says, well, we're spending our energy on sell mode stuff. And sell mode, again, it means trading the guys like Montgomery, Flaherty, Hicks. I think starting from there, figuring out maybe how to thin the glut of position players that you have at certain positions and how you want to handle that if you can do so toward an end of adding pitching. Pitching is the quote that hopefully we'll have time to throw in here from John Mozeliak. But here's an angle from Frank Cusimano that you might be thinking about when it comes to, well, why wouldn't they just re-sign these pitchers, right? Jack Flaherty, Jordan Montgomery, two of their better starters this year. They're a bad starting rotation, but it's not because of these two. How do you suddenly expect to get better in 2024 if you get rid of these two guys? Can you just re-sign them? Frank Cusimano decided to ask that question, and here was the thought from John Mozeliak.
Is there a chance in the next couple of weeks, your free agents to be, you'll negotiate with them to try to lock them up?
You know, I don't want to speculate on that. Obviously, it's not a long list to figure out who we'd be talking to and whatnot, but, you know, I think for our standpoint right now, it's going to be how we can improve and get more talented in the future.
So that pretty much sells it, right? Like, the Cardinals are not looking to bring these pitchers back. If you needed to hear that from Mo, now you have. They're talking about the future. It's not realistic anyway, especially in the case of Montgomery. I don't think for Flaherty either, this far down the road. But for Montgomery, like, he seemed perturbed that the Cardinals didn't bother to ask him before the season and said, hey, once they didn't do that, that's that. We're not going to deal with this during the year. The dude is gone. The dude is as good as gone. It's not to say he doesn't like his teammates. It's not to say he hates St. Louis, any of that. But the Scott Boras client is going to take the bag of money when it is offered to him in the offseason. And I don't even think the Cardinals are going to be willing to extend to a level on Jordan Montgomery that it ultimately would take to get him. Like, Montgomery's going to make some more money from somebody else besides the Cardinals. Whatever that contract ends up being, provided he like finishes the year healthy and doesn't have an issue on that front, I don't anticipate the Cardinals would match the offer that Montgomery ultimately will receive from somebody as a Boras client. He's just not the type of setup that the Cardinals are able to finagle as a starting pitching free agent contract. Steven Matz, that's the world they live in. That's not working. They're very hopeful that Steven Matz can finish the season strong, but that 4-year, $44 million, yeah, they're going to have to figure out a way to raise from that. But I'm telling you, whatever Montgomery's going to make, like, he could make $100 million. He's in his late 20s. How old is Jordan Montgomery? I'll Google it. I'll Google it here without even doing anything. He's 30 years old. He could probably get a 4 to 5 year contract. I think he's worth $20 million a year with the way that he's performing. $80 million, $100 million contract, I don't think it's completely out of the question, depending how many years he gets. So I just don't think the Cardinals would be in on that anyway. You can say that they should be. Totally fair. But for practical purposes, this guy's gone. And Jack Flaherty, I think, is right behind him. Flaherty's at least got the built-up relationship with the Cardinals because of having been here for so many years, but after a year like this, man, I don't think he's going to be clamoring to try and re-sign. And there never was going to be a team-friendly deal, right? So I think, again, and later in the conversation, Mozeliak basically said, I alluded to the reference of the 3 starters, the spots that they have available. He kind of caught himself and was like, well, okay, I get it. We don't have those spots yet. But everybody could see the writing on the wall for what's coming here. All right, let's cut to John Mozeliak being asked about what types of players the Cardinals are going to be targeting at the deadline. We know it's pitching. We'll hear more about that. But in terms of timeline, when do these players need to be ready to contribute in order for the Cardinals to be considering them as attractive in terms of return on the trades that they'll end up making?
Well, hopefully sooner rather than later. We're not looking just for simply like A-ball depth. If we can find talent that we think can help emerge in 2024, that would be great. 2025, I wouldn't rule that out either, but 2026 seems a long way away.
And I think that makes complete sense, and it goes in line with the notion of this team is not looking to trade Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt. Those guys are guys that we expect to see still be in Cardinals uniforms, and in fact, John Mozeliak was asked about that as well, so we can give you the direct quote from him on the topic. He didn't say guaranteed untouchable because he never really likes to do that. But you can tell with the tenor of the conversation that Goldschmidt, Arenado, those are guys the Cardinals are going to be building around for 2024. Not guys that they want to trade away because the rebuild is going to take longer than a year or two. Like, this rebuild is going to take 6 months, right? That's the plan, to go into spring training next year and to be competitive. That's what you're going to hear John Mozeliak continue to describe.
So you would expect this club to be competitive again in 24?
That's the hope. Obviously, a lot has to happen for that, and clearly that's not going to be solely defined as what happens in the next 2 weeks. It'll clearly be like how active we can be in the free agent market this offseason, as well as potentially what types of deals we might be able to do that as well.
So this is kind of the beginning step toward fixing the roster for 2024, and it is largely the pitching staff, rotation, and bullpen that I think that's going to pertain to. Any trades involving position players, I don't think it's going to be to add a position player that they don't have. They've got a number of outfielders. They've got a number of middle infielders. They've got Arenado and Goldschmidt at the corners. They've got 3 catchers, and that's going to be a conversation that has to take place as well. I think we'll have some clips that may get into that topic coming up here still on B-Schaeff Daily. By the way, let me know what you're thinking about everything here in the YouTube comments. Chime in when you hear something interesting from Mo, when you hear something interesting from me. What strikes you about the tenor of the way this day went for the Cardinals and the fact that it seems that they are absolutely in sell mode, not going to be convinced otherwise by the results on the field, and how that impacts a guy like Nolan Arenado, who says the results on the day-to-day basis are the only thing that matters because that's what we do. Certainly a fascinating dichotomy going on, but I wanted to play this aspect of Mozeliak's quotes because he was asked about Goldschmidt, Arenado, how they feel about everything. You already kind of heard how Arenado feels about it, but this was specific to trying to get some insight from Mozeliak on those guys.
I think they understand where we are too right now. And it's not like a quick fix. It's not like we can go out and just trade for someone that's going to change our trajectory at this point. But I think when you look at our everyday club, it's an exciting team to still have in place. And so, can we augment enough pitching this offseason to change the outcome of what we saw this year? And that'll be our goal.
Pitching is indeed what the Cardinals need, and John Mozeliak was not shy about declaring specifically that that's what they'll be looking for coming up on this trade deadline and beyond.
Well, I definitely think we're going to treat the trading deadline as pitching, right? Now, that's not to say we're going to ignore a position player that, may be like just uber great, and so we have to be, cognizant of that. But I think the goal would be to address as much pitching as possible.
And so the next natural question would be how the Cardinals figure out how to come by this pitching. Do you have to physically buy the pitching? Free agency is going to be an aspect of this. Basically, the way I look at it is whatever the Cardinals cannot address via trade over the next couple of weeks, it's probably going to come down to free agency. Now, they could also make trades in the offseason, as Mozeliak has said, but the circumstances will be completely different at that point, and so we won't exactly know the way that they're going to approach it then. But Derek Gould asked a good question here about whether or not the payroll flexibility is such that the Cardinals will be able to add the pitching that they need via free agency, kind of fill the gaps of whatever remains when they get to the winter without maybe making some trades to move some salary that already exists on the roster.
Do you need to make any deals that might free up some salary from next year so that you can spend it on pitching?
Not really.
In the offseason?
I mean, we have a lot coming off the books, so I think for, free agents, when you think about that, I think we'll have dollars.
It's hard to think of, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's hard to think of you filling out a rotation without an addition via free agents.
Oh, it'd be impossible. Yeah. Unless we make like incredible trades that somehow address that, but I don't see that even when I squint.
So there's a little bit of humor from John Mozeliak. Doesn't even see it when he squints, the idea that they'll be able to handle all of these needs via the trade market. But you got to figure they're going to handle at least one of them via trade, right? Like, it doesn't work to go pay a bunch of starting pitchers and say, see, we filled it. It's a stopgap and we fixed it. That is a rarity to be able to, first of all, with the hit rate of this Cardinal front office on free agents, it's not that high. So to think that if they've got 3 spots open in the rotation and they're going to sign 3 free agents, odds are you're not going to get quality out of all of them. You've got to identify the guys in the market that A, you can afford, B, want to be here, and C, are the right guys to go after because you project that they're going to have good performance. And that's scouting and that's advanced data. That's everything that the front office needs to be honed in on when it comes to not only this trade deadline, but when you get to the offseason and you're looking at free agency. Doubling back a bit to the Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt topic, as we talked about, okay, how do these guys feel about it? Well, they understand where we are. That's what Mozeliak said. A little later on in the conversation, he was asked about the notion of potentially trading away those players. And that's something that nationally I think has gotten a lot of pub, even though those kind of in the know, those paying attention locally, realize that that's not in the cards. But you can hear it directly from John Mozeliak exactly how he perceives that situation going into the deadline.
Is it fair to say Goldschmidt or Arenado are not going anywhere? Do they have those assurances?
I don't have any intentions of trading anybody like them. But, you know, like, again, like when you have, if you're willing to like listen on anything, you have to understand. But I doubt that would happen in any scenario at this point. But not ruling anything out at the moment. But I mean, both those guys have complete no trades, and I think from their standpoint, they really just want to know directionally what we look like for next year.
And as long as the direction is, hey, we're adding a bunch of pitching, I think both Goldschmidt and Arenado are going to be okay with it. I really don't think these guys are looking to jump ship. I don't think they're looking to waive those no-trade clauses. You heard from Nolan Arenado back at the All-Star break, the All-Star game. He doesn't have any interest in being anywhere else. He wants to win. I think he still thinks St. Louis could be a place where he can do that. And he's still focused on trying to make that happen in 2023, as you heard from him earlier. So it's uncomfortable where the Cardinals are. Cardinals fans aren't used to seeing it this way, but kind of giving a sense for what John Mozeliak expects at the deadline, what he does not expect, like in terms of trying to shop Arenado and Goldschmidt. Yeah, you're never going to say never to something, because what if a team is just desperate and offers a ridiculous package where you go, okay, have to consider that. Or when it comes to Arenado, if you're getting value of just a ton of players and they're going to pay the salary too, that has to bake in at some point. But I think bottom line is going to be that Arenado and Goldschmidt, what they're going to bring to your lineup in 2024 as two of your best players still, it's going to be worth more to the Cardinals than whatever they can get in these trade propositions because of what Mo said in terms of what they're valuing right now. 2024, guys prepared to arrive in 2024 is the priority. 2025 can be interesting in certain scenarios, but he said 2026 feels like a long way away, which is kind of a hint to say that the Cardinals aren't looking to keep Montgomery and Flaherty through the end of the season in order to do the qualifying offer thing and get a draft pick. Draft picks are not going to help John Mozeliak, basically, because he is going to be gone before those draft picks ever see the light of day or the light of the big leagues, however you want to phrase that. So I do think there is a sense of urgency from Bill DeWitt, from John Mozeliak, to say, like, what we need to be doing is prioritizing next season to make sure that this kind of year does not happen again and does not become a trend. Mo went on to say pitching. I don't know if I even played the clip for you, but he literally did say pitching in regards to what they're looking to do at the deadline. As far as the glut of different position players at different spots on the roster, whether that's middle infield, outfield, catcher, I think you could probably say about all three spots, they've got more guys than they need, perhaps, or they have to still identify which guys they want to place their bets on at those various positions. John Mozeliak said he doesn't feel compelled to necessarily have to clear up those log jams in the next 14 days. But I think prior to 2024, spring training 2024, that's where if you don't see the trade of a middle infielder in the next couple of weeks, I think you might in the offseason. And it may not be the worst thing. If they can't find the pitcher that they need now, it may not be the worst thing to delay it into the offseason, if only because you might have a chance to find out more about a guy like Nolan Gorman. Like, what does he look like over a full season to give you a better idea of what you could be missing out on if you decide to unload him? Now, the risk in that is he struggles and maybe loses trade value, but the Cardinals may not have interest in trading him anyway, right? Like, he's a good hitter. He's a left-handed power bat. They may want to build around him, but they do have to make some of these difficult decisions and get it figured out pretty quickly. The one area where I think you would end up kind of missing the boat on and not having as much leverage is if the Seattle Mariners are really looking to make a move, their GM's not going to wait. It's probably going to happen in the next 14 days. Jerry Dipoto has said he wants to add offense, to add hitting to that lineup, and Seattle has a ton of pitching. I don't know that they're going to trade from the high-end group of that pitching. Logan Gilbert would be a great piece to go after, but I don't know if he's actually available or available for a price tag that's not just like, hey, give us Jordan Walker. And the Cardinals will be like, how about no? But if they end up getting realistic and make some trades to try and address their lineup before the deadline, because anything's possible with wild card, like they could still be in the mix. I could definitely envision the Cardinals wanting to get in on that. But that's the only circumstance where I feel like you've got to trade a middle infielder because Edman, Gorman, Donovan, we've talked a lot about it on B-Schaeff Daily, like all those players. So kind of interesting, but he's basically saying, no, we don't feel compelled to have to do it. It's just going to be, does it make sense for bettering the roster? If so, we're going to look into those types of trades. Mo's open-minded, it sounds like, I think is the way to phrase it. What he's also open-minded to is the idea that the Cardinals could revisit the role of Wilson Contreras as the team's primary catcher based on just how disastrous things have gone. However, he's only open-minded to it. He's not saying they're going to do it. It's certainly not something that's going to happen at this point in the middle of the season. But Ben Fred, I thought, asked a pretty thoughtful question about could it be something you look into doing in the offseason based on the performance of certain guys on the team, like Ivan Herrera, for instance, right now, kind of taking command of his opportunities when he does get a chance to be the backstop out there. So this was the question from Ben Fred, and I thought an interesting answer from John Mozeliak. Let me know, do you hear the same level of support that guys like Arenado and Goldschmidt got in terms of their role being secure as you hear about Wilson Contreras here? Because I would say the answer to that is a definitive no.
Well, as we look toward 2024, how do you view the catching situation? Is it Contreras and you stick with him after a rough debut here in many ways, or do you revisit that perhaps with the time of an offseason? How do you look at where the catcher is moving forward?
Yeah, I think we'll table that till the offseason. Obviously, when we look back at it in the short term now, there's some things that need to change. I think, short view is kind of nice, what we're seeing out of like Cabrera right now, which is good. But, ultimately, I think when we start thinking about 2024, some of those things will have to be more addressed in the offseason.
The idea that after just a handful of months, the Wilson Contreras signing, which was so touted and so beloved in the offseason, John Mozeliak, his staff, they spoke about it like a humongous win for the Cardinals. But I think as time has gone on, man, we're seeing the process expedited. All the things that we did talk about on B-Schaeff Daily when the signing happened, talked about it before the signing happened, all of those concerns about what would it look like year 4, year 5 of a contract for Wilson Contreras. Yeah, it's great. You're going to have the offensive boost that you need, but what is the implication of his work behind the plate and how that's going to age over time? It hasn't even become a factor because of age. It's just a factor, I think, because of what he's been. I don't know if that's the ceiling of who he is, but it's not been a strong year for Wilson Contreras behind the plate. I don't think everything was his fault that was being kind of heaped onto him in terms of the scapegoat kind of practice that took place when they benched him from the catching position earlier in the year. But I think we're seeing a lot of just like lackadaisical play from Contreras behind the plate. And I went in on this a couple of nights ago to where I don't feel compelled to spend too much time on it here, but it's certainly a factor. Go back to if you're on YouTube, go back to the video that's got Burleson and his leaping catch as the thumbnail picture, because that was the one that I did spend some time going, all right, this Contreras stuff is getting bad. So go back and check out that video if you haven't seen it. But yeah, it sounds like John Mozeliak and the Cardinals are in a spot where they are regretting the move. I don't think you would answer the question that way if you didn't have some level of regret. He says, we'll table that. The fact that you're having to say, well, we'll table whether or not we're going to remove Contreras, think of him more as just a DH, or, God forbid, actually put him in the outfield, which I could totally see happening. I could see that in November. John Mozeliak is giving a little speech or whatever and saying, yeah, we're going to tell Contreras to try and train for the outfield in the offseason. Because if you can't catch him, you can't just lock up DH every day. That's not the way the Cardinals want to approach the DH role, especially with an aging Paul Goldschmidt and aging Arenado. You want to be able to get those guys off their feet from time to time, and that's only going to be, I think, more of a priority as they get into their in Arenado's case, mid-30s, and Goldie is late 30s, which I know Goldie's only under contract for one more year. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think if they want to bring him back for longer, they will. But interesting to hear the way that Contreras is spoken about in relation to the other stars of this team. It's only been a few months, but I feel like they're having some buyer's remorse already on Contreras. And again, I've talked about how it can pan out. His contract can be okay, but he's going to have to hit to a ridiculous degree. And he's done a better job of that recently, but on the season, the numbers are pretty underwhelming when you consider that he's been lackluster behind the plate. All right. It's late. I'll be totally honest. It's 4 a.m. right now when I'm doing this. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. But anyway, there is a quote from John Mozeliak about what went wrong this season for the Cardinals. I'm going to probably put that into a Tuesday night episode of B-Schaeff Daily. Going to save that one because we're about ready to wrap this thing up. So if you guys have enjoyed the content so far, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to B-Schaeff Daily on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you'll be locked in and be getting those episodes moving forward. Something to look forward to. A little bit of a teaser for Tuesday night. But I do have to talk about Genesis Cabrera because he's not on the team anymore. He's not a Cardinal. I mean, technically he's a Cardinal, but he's not coming back. Trust me, he's not coming back. This ain't going to be one of those deals where he's outrighted to Memphis if he clears waivers. No. His time with the team is done. And it was fascinating to hear the way John Mozeliak phrased it when asked about kind of what deteriorated between the situation of the Cardinals and Cabrera, because he was, you'd think, at least a trade candidate. But why the DFA? Why now?
I think the big thing, I don't think he loved the role he was in. And, ultimately I felt like as we were trying to get this to work, we kept, hitting some headwinds. So, now he'll get that opportunity to do it somewhere else.
Well, was that strictly a performance issue? Or?
Yeah, and I think it was also just on a personal issue, meaning I just think he felt like he deserves higher leverage innings and didn't always feel like he was getting it. Now, part of that's how a team's playing and, when you can actually use someone who's available. And I don't know if every player always looks at it with that kind of understanding.
It seems clear to me that Genesis Cabrera had very little understanding of where the Cardinals were with things. And the reason I take the Cardinals side with this is because, well, there are some other off-the-field things. You can Google it. Genesis Cabrera, maybe a bit of a knucklehead off the field at times. And to me, it's another one of those guys where, the focus, the attention span is not there unless he is in a role that he deems worth his time. Since the really good 2020 season that he had during the COVID year, his numbers have deteriorated year over year. He had a 2-some-odd ERA, and then it was 3.7, then 4.6. Now it's 5.06. And he's walked a ton of batters. He's not been sharp. The velocity, it used to be 98, 99. It's low 90s sometimes. He's just not been the same guy. Now, I do think he's going to end up somewhere, probably on a playoff-type roster. And I tweeted this out. I would set the over-under at 1.5 on strikeouts in the playoffs this year for Genesis Cabrera, and I'm taking the over. Because it just feels like the next Cardinal that got away. But honestly, this shouldn't be a revisionist history. We know that Genesis Cabrera has talent. He refused, I think, to make it work with the Cardinals and was acting like he was deserving of more prominent opportunities than he was getting. Your ERA was 5, brother. Your ERA was 5. The way it works in this league is you perform in the opportunities that you're given, you demonstrate responsibility for those moments, and they might give you a little bit more. They'll put more on your plate. So I am not in any way on the side of Genesis Cabrera with this one. Like I had said, he went on to Instagram Live afterward. It was during the Cardinal game. Pretty sure he's wearing his Cardinal tank top because it was a red tank top that was inside out because you could see the tag hanging out. So that's fun. I don't even know what to make of that. It's just objectively hilarious. But yeah, the Cardinals can trade him is the bottom line. And so they'll have a few days, 7 days to do that. And then if they don't, I think he goes on irrevocable trade waivers, which basically is whoever claims him gets him. If nobody claims him, I think he'll be a free agent. I think his time with the Cardinals is over. I mean, you heard Mo there. Well, I think it was more of a personal issue, actually. He wanted this, and now he's going to have that chance. Goodbye. To have been a fly on the wall during whatever conversation took place between Cabby and John Mozeliak. Or Cabby and whoever broke him the news. Because that is hysterical stuff. He's got a 5.06 ERA, and you're going to talk about you want more leverage? Give me a break. So, hey, we end on a lighter note here tonight, but let me know what you think about all this. Drop your thoughts into the YouTube comments section. Like the videos. Check out the Dylan Carlson video if you missed that one. I split up this episode of B-Schaeff Daily into two. If you want to hear the whole thing consecutively, Spotify is the place to go for that, or Apple Podcast for my iPhone users out there. But at long last, I think that is going to do it for this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. I appreciate you guys so much for listening, for sticking with me. We need like a code word for anybody that made it through the entire episode. If you watched all hour and 20 minutes of this thing, or listened, let me know. The code word is going to be hashtag everyday. You send me a DM on Twitter, hashtag everyday, which of course is a play on Everyday Dylan. Hashtag everyday. Let me know. That means you listen to the whole damn thing, and you're a great supporter of the content here on B-Schaeff Daily. Thank you guys so much, and we will talk to you next time, provided I'm awake for Tuesday on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.